Hi, I'm Bill Kristol. Welcome back to Conversations. I'm very pleased to be joined again by James Carville. We last spoke in September. James was worried about the Biden campaign, give some useful advice, I think.
Yeah.
We can talk about where he thinks things stand now. I won't even bother with the introduction of James. He needs none. So, James, thanks for joining me.
Well, thank you, Bill. Always a pleasure, but I wish we were under happier circumstances, but here we
Well,
are.
let's make them
Okay.
happier. We can do it
Right.
here. Tell
Uh,
where are we in the campaign and the presidential campaign? We're discussing what is it, May 29th, just after Memorial Day. That's a traditional kind of break point, right? Where everyone says, okay, where are we on Memorial Day? Where are we? And then let's get to what should be done.
well, first of all, just if you look at the overall thing, people feel like the country's going in the wrong direction. The combined number of people that would rather have another choice is as high as I can ever remember it. The third party vote at this time is as high as I could ever remember it. Uh, but the actual distance between President Biden and Trump is anywhere between even and Biden -2. I
Right.
mean, it's 2.5 maybe. It's clearly very close. There clearly can be events that can have an impact on the outcome of this election. But I mean, we're headed into an election that not very many people are very excited about. That's the undeniable truth. And how that turns out in terms of turnout, it's anybody's guess.
So what do you, I mean, any, if you had your 30 seconds with President Biden, any one point you'd emphasize most that they're not doing quite right, or they could be doing that they're not doing, or 2 points, 3 points?
I would say don't tell people how good the economy is. Because what happens is he says that, and statistically, he's right. All right. You can point to 5 things that say that the economy has performed well. But the problem you have, Bill, is the economy is great for people like you and I. It is not good for under 35 or under 30. And if you think about it, if you're a net saver, you live in a pretty good economy, even given the cost of living and everything. But these young people see no hope that they'll ever buy a house. Interest rates, insurance rates, they're completely priced out of the market. These thieves that run these institutions of higher learning, who is Scott Galloway correctly called your alma mater a hedge fund that has classes. Uh,
A very wealthy hedge fund, right?
yeah, I
52.
love the hedge fund, but people feel like they can't afford it. And I would urge Biden to talk about the things that he's done to help people get through the cost of living, and like prescription drug price caps and releasing the strategic petroleum reserve. And there's another thing that I would really urge him to talk about. It's not very fancy. It's always been around. It's always popular, but never enforced. Is put the minimum wage at $15. You're doing terribly with younger voters and black voters. Well, there's a lot of young people and black people that make the minimum wage. If you look at the historic chart of the value of the minimum wage, you can see. And so not only you're going to raise somebody making $7.50 an hour, you're going to somebody who's making $12 an hour, they're going to their salaries will go up appropriately. Now you say, well, that's going to, it's going to put a commercial business a burden. But we do know that every dollar a low wage worker makes, they put back into the economy. A dollar you give to a high wage person, they put a fourth in the economy, a half in savings, and a fourth to pay taxes or something. All right, they don't have that savings part. They're net borrowers. So that's really hurting him in the economy, and it's hurting him with young voters.
So I guess two questions to follow up on that. It sounds to me like you think the inflation slash economic well-being, especially of younger and less well-off people, remains the crucial issue he's got to address. A and B. I'm struck when you talk about these things. You're very clear, and they sound they could be attractive politically. Am I wrong to say that the Biden campaign? I feel like he gives some good speeches and he has some good policies, and but I don't hear there's not they're not sustained somehow. I feel like everything is a one-off, and there's no theme or narrative. Is that a little unfair, or is that just the way the world is today with social media and stuff? Or what do you think about that? You ran a campaign that was very good at staying on message and developing a very consistent message through
I
weeks and
think it's
months.
very fair. I think it's very fair. And I like there's things that he's for that people don't know. And one of the big problems they have in that everyone has is we don't know how to run against Trump. All right. Because he's a liar, but he's going to appoint bad people to the government. All right. There's so many things. Is he a crook? Is he a risk to national security? Is he going to, in the federal bureaucracy as we know it, is he going to put these really crazy judges on a bench? Is he going to get out of NATO? And people are just sort of overwhelmed. And there's just, we're not focusing on how we want to run against Trump. And the president's campaign, I don't think has settled on, I think the economic message is things are better than you think they are, which if left alone, maybe, some pea shoots of hope, some consumer confidence numbers might look a little bit better, but you got to let people come to that conclusion, because if you come to the conclusion for them and they don't think it's a good economy, they say, well, how can this guy fix something that he doesn't even think is broke? And I have to say this, every conversation that everyone has in every focus group about President Biden begins with age, in the middle is age, and at the end is age. And that's a real fact that you have to live with. And they just got to plow through it, because getting mad at the New York Times for talking about his age is not going to work.
But presumably one way to follow through it is to have a forward-looking agenda, as you were saying. I do feel like that's...
It would be nice if he came out with 3 or 4 things he wanted with his second term, to give at least something other than you should be happy with what you got. The message is from Biden, you should be happy with what you got. From Trump is you should be happy with what you had. But there's no message in there that says you're going to be happy with what you're going to see. And it's ripe, and he could do that. He could say, we have unfinished work. I have a record to build on, not to sit on. But we've created a foundation by, chips and new green energy projects and, create anything like that. But have some future conclusion that it's all going to get better.
And that's pretty urgent that they start saying that, you think? I mean, President Biden sometimes says, well, people don't focus till the fall and all this, but I don't know.
I hear that all the time, and I'm sure that people come in and say that. And people say, the average American spends 4 minutes a day worrying about politics. Or no one is going to decide till after I'll go to the shore. And they won't decide till they come back from the shore. Or they go to the Hamptons. At the Hamptons they're going to decide. No, they're watching and they're absorbing what's going on around them. And I've heard all of these theories about when voters decide or don't decide. Our big problem, the Democrats' big problem is I don't see how we can replicate the 2020 coalition. The under 30 was 17% of the share. In other words, 17 out of 100 people who voted in 2020 were under 30, and of that, President Biden got 62%. Black was 12% share. 12 out of every 100 people that voted black, Biden got 90%. I don't think you're going to hit those numbers this year, so you have to make it up somewhere else. Now, the good news is we do seem to be doing somewhat better with older whites, which is good because they vote higher than other people. So if you had to have somebody that you're doing better on, that's not a bad demographic to have. But we're and I've said this before, I'll say it again. The Democratic Party has a male problem. Males are 48% of the vote. I defy anyone to listen to, say, NPR and not hear 4 times. This is coming down to college-educated women. No, I think it's coming down to women of color. Well, women in general, yes, the women are 52%. But how do you develop a political party that talks to 52% of the country? In part, and albeit 52%, we ought to think about the 48 sometimes.
Yeah. And how do they, I mean, I'm struck. I was recently, I've been quoting your former boss and your friend, Bill Clinton. People prefer, what is it? Americans prefer strong and wrong
Strong and wrong and weak and right.
Do you believe that? Is that part of the problem here?
I believe it to a point. I don't think they want strong and authoritarian or
Right.
strong and wrong or strong and crooked. But I do think his general point is that they prefer decisive people, who really. I think that Biden looks weak. Maybe he's done everything he can in his dealings with Netanyahu. I mean, it just keeps saying, no more of this, no more of that. And of course, you get more of this, you get more of that. And it's a problem. Gaza is completely misunderstood by the press. What else is new? The Harvard poll, if you remember, the two things they cared the least about were Gaza and student loans. I'm not surprised at all. But
and this was a poll of young. This was a poll of young voters, right?
Yes, under 30. Under 30. They gave them 15 issues, and number 14 and number 15 were student loans in Gaza. I forget what order they came in, but there were so few people, it's not even worth worrying about. Which of course completely disrupts the view. Now, forget the campus protests of whoever they are, or if they even go to college. But there is a general unease among people about what's happening in Gaza. That's undeniable. And it's not just Rashida Tlaib or my favorite, the meal plan revolutionary.
Yeah,
we don't have our mac and cheese. We're not going to have a revolution. Oh, okay. Yeah, and you can just overall discomfort, like, did they really have to do that? And it's creating a world of confusion in foreign policy. Obviously, even allies are starting to get really, they've got Ireland, I guess Spain and Norway recognized Palestine or something like that. You can feel where this thing is going, and it's not in a great direction.
And I do think that whatever the right policy is, or whatever need there might be for a change in policy, the extent to which the Biden administration allows itself to look as if it's being dragged along towards these changes. This is very true of Ukraine policy too, I think, as opposed to sort of saying, okay, now we're doing this. I mean, Reagan made some pretty terrible decisions. We had a terrible disaster in Lebanon in the fall of '83 with the Marines being killed. But, one got the sense, okay, I mean, he acknowledged it, and then he pivoted very quickly. And I'm not using that as an example. And Reagan, of course, everyone cites it's too much. He's too high a standard, I suppose, of sort of political skill. But I just don't, it feels like he could be more decisive, whichever course he chooses to take, or even if he chooses to change course,
Yeah, I remember the '83 of Barracks,
Yeah.
I actually think he was too willing to move on. I think some people really screwed that up. And
I agree totally. Yeah.
But he got beyond it. That's undeniable. But there was some look. There's no more massive act of negligence on a part of any nation since World War II than there was by the Israeli government on October 7th.
Right.
That's just staggeringly, and so much of that was a result of hubris, of thinking that we had everything under control. It was all done. And boy, when you look back at how arrogant they were, you could see how something like this would happen. And what really bothers me is just I don't how does this thing end? I mean, maybe you've talked to people, a lot more people in foreign policy than I do, but what is Gaza going to be like 5 years from now? Other than a place where journalists are going to come and see, what a pathetic, wretched life they have. I don't see it going anybody. Maybe it will, but right now it's pretty hard to see how this thing ends.
Yeah, and I guess this is the trouble with being an incumbent, right? I mean, that you are blamed for stuff that happens that you're not really responsible for, but the world looks chaotic. And
Right. So Bill, the people are demonstrating against Biden, and the public is blaming Biden for the demonstration.
right.
Right. So I mean, you got to be in a really bad situation where people are protesting you and people are mad at you for allowing people to protest. One time there was a story I read, I couldn't stop laughing. It was some anti-Biden Gaza protesters, and it was some, Proud Boys or something, counter protesters. And the only thing they could agree on is they started chanting, F Joe Biden, F Joe Biden.
Right.
And then the public thinks that, well, Joe Biden can't control these demonstrators. He's the only person that's divided, that brought the unite the right and the Palestine liberation, whatever these people call themselves. It's just, that was the moment that I said, oh man, this guy can't win no matter what he does.
Well, but I think you think he could win. I mean, it's maybe slightly less than 50-50. What about the timing? So it's the end of May. We have this debate, presumably on June 27th. Is that A, likely to happen in your view? And B, is that actually a moment where people might focus in a big way as opposed to one speech here, one speech there kind of thing?
So let's take something we know as a fact. All right. Democrats have not lost since Kansas. This just happened. Maybe I think somebody pointed out, wasted Western Nebraska, that we were supposed to lose by 23 and lost by 7. All right. So we know that. We know this drives voting behavior. If he's fortunate, I don't think Trump will go to the debate. And
Yeah.
I base that on he'll do anything that's not in his perceived self-interest. And this is one of these things where he could hurt. Biden has a chance to help himself. Right. But let's say that he goes. What if I were his debate coach? I would say that I am not outsourcing Supreme Court picks. Plain and simple, I will ask every prospective nominee, do you believe there's an inherent right to privacy in the Constitution as I do? If they answer yes, I will say, do you believe that the Supreme Court should operate under the same code of ethics as federal district courts do throughout the United States? Answers yes, I will consider that nominee. But because I think it'll really, really drive home. And Trump's trying to, and you can watch him. He's every state, I'll think something. We're going to have great policy, and it's the best issue the Democrats have. It just is, and time and time again, you see it proving itself in one special after another. So that has to be part of President Biden's reelection strategy, an integral part. But it has to be said in a way that people can understand.
Yeah, I think the backward looking, he's responsible for Dobbs is okay, but it's the way you put it is good because it's forward looking, right? I'm going to do this as president in the next 4 years. And Trump, incidentally, we know what he's going to do because he already had 4 years to appoint these people.
Right. And he's bragged on it. He's going to continue to give you the same kind of court you got right now, the same court restricting rights, the same court of ethical calamities after another, the same partisanship. I mean, for almost our lives, Bill, the Supreme Court was never a big issue. We'd talk about it, the partisans. It was good for fundraising. It gets the base excited. All right, and let's move on to something else. Now, it's become an enormous issue. And the other thing I would do, and I'm trying to encourage it, and I think I'm going to get it done, is an entire, 10-page piece of research on every effort that Republicans have tried or said they wanted to get rid of birth control. Because I got news for you. Birth control is popular out there. Those pills, the people like them. And you got to drive it home. You got to keep them answering. You got to keep Trump off guard. You can do with things like this. You can't let him get his footing. And I just don't see him being a sufficient irritant out there. But then they have a big financial advantage. They could open up some opportunities here over the summer.
Yeah, I mean, I think people's views settle in, and I think this notion that you wait till September strikes me as very risky. You have the conventions in July and August; those things are kind of shows, but they don't really change, I don't think, people's minds. So you really this June feels to me like a big month to make progress, both with paid advertising and with earned media messaging. And then if there's a debate at the end, and if there's not a debate, I guess Biden at least gets to beat up Trump for being, for ducking out, right?
Well, yeah, and the other thing is, one of the things that we've seen over our careers is the erosion of the convention bounce.
Right.
Yeah, I remember when Dukakis actually went ahead of Bush after the convention. All right, didn't stay ahead, obviously, but even Mondale gained a lot of ground on Reagan, and post convention. Now you don't get a one or two. The convention doesn't even matter anymore. So in the events that people have traditionally marked things by, the convention bounce, the Labor Day start, that just doesn't apply in today's presidential politics, I don't think.
Do you think, though, the debate would still be important? I mean, that seems like that's an unusual moment if it happens.
If the debate is about abortion, it will help a lot. All right. And if the debate, I actually think that I'm really thinking hard about this, but they should run against MAGA and not Trump.
Interesting.
Explain because that. MAGA is less popular than Trump. And what I would think that Biden's going to say is, you've been overtaken by this MAGA movement. And because we need a lot of people who voted for Trump. And not all of them are MAGA. A lot of them have different reasons. We need some of those people. And if we can drive a stake between MAGA and them, we could get some, or some could stay home because they're not comfortable with it. And I do think that MAGA is going to be here. Martha Ann Alito will be here far after Biden. Trump is gone, let me tell you. She'll be here. So I think that's a potential to tie him to the movement, because the movement is, according to NBC poll, is a 24% approve. He's 42. I think you have an opportunity there, but you got to take opportunities at every point. And I think there's only so much Biden can do. I think if you talk to him, they say, James, that's a great idea, but we got to get him out there to say that, and that's not the easiest thing in the world to do. And I can understand that. But let's see if we have this debate on the June the 27th.
Yeah, I'm struck how much people just assume it's going to happen because Trump said he would do it. I assume Trump won't do it if he thinks this is not in his interest.
He said he was going to testify at the trial.
Yeah, right.
He thought that. And you know what? When he didn't testify, it didn't cost him anything.
Right.
It was very little even. Well, you said, so he'll say, he's already said that CNN K hosts, they're not fair.
Right.
He's just going to brush it off and say it can't be fair. I told Biden to take a drug test. He wouldn't take a drug test. My answer would be, will you give us the records that Keith Schiller stole from Dr. Bornstein in 2017? That no one's ever asked you about. You went in his office, the doctor said he felt like he was raped, sent your goons in there, and be glad to. You release those health records. But he doesn't pay. We paid zero price for not testifying his own behalf. None. And he from that he's learned that do what I want. I'm back out of the debate. What are they going to do to me?
I mean, do you think, though, that Biden literally every day for the next month just says in the course of discussing whatever issue he's discussing, I very much look forward to debating Donald Trump on this. I'm going to explain, why my policies are better than his. I mean, it would make it a little hard. You could do a little, make him pay a little bit of a price, maybe. I don't know. Maybe not. He seems to be good at avoiding paying prices.
I think that's a good idea. So, something I want to discuss on June 27th is the presence of Donald Trump.
Right.
And I think it's much more effective. But as you know, Jennifer, we're very committed to blah, blah, blah. But I think it's a good idea at every point. And, we'll be glad that people talk about this economy, that economy. It's obviously be glad to discuss that. Up and coming back, Donald Trump, June 27th, CNN, be there, be square. We're looking forward to it. And we're looking forward to having another big debate so people can see where we are in this thing. Yeah, I think that gives you some lift because he don't want to do it.
Yeah, you could even release some questions ahead of time that you give Donald Trump the advantage of knowing what you're going to tell him about the courts or whatever. And they're gimmicks, right? I mean, they don't seem to use gimmicks. I don't know why not. Gimmicks are kind of useful in campaigns, I think. Yeah? I mean, gimmicks are not unimportant in campaigns, right? You got to bring this stuff home somehow, and they just seem. That's what I guess what I am slightly.
Gimmicks and sound bites. I always tell people, there's one sound bite that would supplant all of the combined wisdom in the world. Love your neighbor as yourself. Give me anything more profound than that, but with deeper meaning, with treat others as you want to be treated yourself. That the general concept of the golden rule is a breathtakingly good soundbite. It's very short, takes no time, and everybody understands the implications of it all. Now, the problem with Biden is he's not very, and he never has been very good on the attack. All right, it's not just that he's old; he's just never been a particularly effective attack politician. And how much of this he can pull off, I don't know.
Yeah, that's interesting. What about this? We're talking Wednesday morning, the 29th. The trial is about to go to the jury in New York. Do you think that has any potential for affecting anything? Could the campaign use it effectively over a month if he's convicted?
It's all this coverage and all these panels, and he did this. This was a good day for that. I saw the expression on his face, and I saw this, and we got a panel here, and there've been so many lawyer panels. I don't even know what to even think anymore. But the question, can it have an effect? The answer is yes. If he's acquitted or even a hung jury, that will excite his people and it will demoralize a lot of Democrats. How much? Don't know. An acquittal would be very good for him and would really demoralize them. Now, the lawyers say it's not going to be an acquittal. I don't know. But if there's a guilty verdict, remember, juries are supreme. And what that juror, that foreman, whoever goes out and speaks for the jury, says is going to have a lot of say. And you can say, well, it's a Manhattan jury. Well, it's a Manhattan jury of Manhattan, Kansas, Manhattan, New York. They're all people. And they all sat there. We sat for 6 weeks. We listened to, 28 hours of testimony. We went through every charge. We waited. That matters to people. And so people say, well, the hardcore Trump, probably not going to affect the hardcore. But as we talked about earlier, he can't win with just MAGA. And so a lot of people that that even I know some, they don't want to vote for a Democrat. They're very uncomfortable with Trump, but they don't know. This will keep them away. They'll either vote for Biden or not vote. And so what you just can't look at the Trump vote is hardcore MAGA, because we know that's not enough. And Haley gets 22% in a closed Republican primary in a place like Indiana and Nebraska. It's a lot of people. And that 22% is going to have terribly hard time voting for a Democrat, and the most likely scenario for most of them is they will return to their traditional partisan habits, but a conviction could stop that. So I think it can have an impact, maybe not for it's not going to be a moment where somebody in South Mississippi, comes up to me at the Walmart and says, James, God, I was so wrong all of my life. And thank God I saw the light. No, that's not going to happen. But you could get some what I call loosely aligned voters. And there may be some loosely aligned Democrats that think the economy was better under Trump, and this may stop some bleeding on that end too.
Yeah, that sounds right to me. It seems to me, though, that the Biden campaign, to come back to the campaign for a minute, or even the outside groups, they have a tendency to think, okay, well, the guilty thing will explain itself. Whereas I think they really need to be ready to just do a massive effort to plaster the phrase convicted felon on Trump's forehead, because it will affect maybe some 2, 3, 4% of those Republicans, give them a permission structure to stay home, maybe for some of them to vote for Biden. I don't know, but I worry that they think that the news explains itself. You know what I mean? And okay, guilty verdict, that's done. Let's move on.
Yes, the question is, how does Biden address Trump in debate? But, former President Trump and future inmate. And there's I think so much of the Biden campaign is meant with getting Biden in the right mood and to do a few things. I think it's probably a lot harder than we believe over there. They have to be very, very careful how he's deployed, and they have to husband him pretty closely. And I can't fault him for that.
Yeah,
but yes, you're right. You have to. How is he going to be? How are you going to address him?
Yeah, that's a good point. But in the meantime, you can use paid media and stuff to really remind
the big
people.
Thing is going to be the jury. If there's a conviction,
right?
How those jurors come across is going to have a lot to how much people accept this verdict.
Yeah, that's interesting. And if Trump loses it, which he might, and attacks the jury, I feel like that's an opportunity also to say he's attacking these Americans who are doing their duty, right?
Right. If these jurors, what I give to prepare what I'm for Sunday morning TV, first of all, we took collectively, this jury took 21,250 hours out of their lives. We listened to 28,000 words of testimony. We sat there and observed every witness. We conscientiously went through every document, and we could arrive at no other conclusion with this. Boom. Boom. And, who the juror is, who the elect foreman, how articulate she or he is. Yeah, it all depends a lot. But how that jury justifies what they did can have a lot of effect on public opinion. And we never really considered politics in this, to be honest with you. The judge told us not to, and we tried to follow it, but the judge said it's like any other American would. If any of that kind of talk will get you a long, long way.
Yeah, that's interesting. I do think people have been a little too quick on to dismiss that case. It's not the case everyone wanted. It's not January 6th. It's not federal court. But yeah, jury convictions have a certain
my favorite
power.
is Fareed Zakaria, who's a nice guy, but he said, if an ordinary American did this when you're indicted, well, what ordinary American is going to have sex with a porn star, ask the porn star to beat him on the butt with a rolled up magazine, then have a catch and kill story, and then come up with $130,000 so somebody doesn't find out and embarrass your presidential campaign? Well, yeah, I guess if an average American did that, I would think, because that's just not an everyday occurrence in America, is it? When you stop and you think about it, and I'm sure, but I wasn't there for closing, but I'm sure the prosecution argued, look, the law entitles you to certain information before you make a decision. That's your right. That the law grants that to you. And he hid that from the American people, who were the real victims here. If it didn't matter, then if it was public, then people could easily conclude that it didn't matter. But they weren't given that choice because of Mr. Trump's duplicity, that was hidden from people which they had a right to know. I think if you make that argument, it's the fraud that was perpetrated was on the people, on the voter. I think I'll take it a longer way.
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
And it's also good to talk about the facts of the case. Well, I don't know if the average American, did this, and when you go through it, you go, Jesus, did all that happen? Yeah, it all happened.
That would be something if on June 27th, Biden says what you just said. That would be a memorable moment in American presidential politics,
Yeah, like I say, that the Republicans have, first of all, your group, which is, can't say enough good about it, the way that y'all just understand the threat ahead, and let's don't whine and complain. Let's just try to get this threat dealt with, and then we can deal with something else 4 years from now. And that's again, you have these 1/5 to 1/4 of Republican primary voters are just obstinate about not voting for Trump, and that's a lot. Then on the Democratic side, our biggest weaknesses are, first of all, the ages, but you can't do anything about that, is really tepid numbers among under 30 and really tepid numbers with blacks, and a lot of it driven by males.
Yeah, there's no obvious fix for some of that. But I think your point, just say a little more about the MAGA extremism point, because I think that was really true in 2022 when, Republican voters against Trump. We did a lot against Mastriani and Pennsylvania and other extreme MAGA candidates. And the extremism MAGA message worked. We didn't really talk about Trump much in those races. And Shapiro won by, and they did, and Shapiro didn't, and Whitmer didn't, and they won by 15 and 10 points in swing states. I feel like there's more to be developed there. And so the Trump stuff almost swamps everything else, and people forget how actually extreme some of these policies are.
Yeah, by the way, Shapiro, I might have more admiration and respect for him than any politician in America. I mean, what they did was just really smart politics, getting Mastriano and kind of helping him be the nominee. And you can talk about, Nick Fuentes. Why not? He had dinner with Nick Fuentes, all right? And, what cracks me up, you have some, not very, 20% of what I'd call, quote, pro-Israel, unquote, community that likes Trump. Okay, well, you like Nick Fuentes. How about Hamas leader in Moscow meeting with Putin? So wait, you're not that bothered about Ukraine, but you can't stand Hamas. Well, guess what? Who Hamas is buttering up to? None other than Vladimir Putin. I mean, we'd be a little clear in delineating our enemies here. But there's also a limit to what the president and his campaign can achieve. If you had a candidate of, George W. Bush, I believe Obama, Clinton, most candidates, they can go out and execute. Biden can't do that. That's an asset that they just have to be very careful how they deploy it, and it has to be only under, kind of laboratory conditions. That's just a function of having an 82-year-old candidate, a soon-to-be 82-year-old candidate. Just one asset you don't have.
Yeah, no, one keeps coming back to that, unfortunately, but it is what it is. What about Trump? Do you agree that the Trump campaign, leaving aside Trump, who's not very disciplined and says some things he probably shouldn't and all that, but the Trump, he's not without skill himself. Obviously, he's a demagogue, but the Trump campaign has been pretty, I say this with regret, but pretty competent and pretty professional, don't you think, for the last year or so?
I do, and it's much better. I think just Susie Wiles is kind of a professional, and it does seem, and other people have said the same thing. There was more of a haphazard seat of your pants, Steve Bannon, everybody fighting over money. I do think it's more discipline. I agree with you, and I think there are a lot of people that agree with you.
Yeah, and I think it's led to some rating of them in a sense. Everyone keeps waiting for them to make some horrible mistakes, but they're running a pretty, except for Trump personally, to some degree, they're running a pretty disciplined campaign, I'd say.
And, what they did in the primaries was really remarkable. We tend to write that up. He was an incumbent, polarizing figure. You would say, well, he's going to get what he starts out with. And actually, he ended up with a lot. I mean, what they did to Ron DeSantis, what Susie Wiles did to Ron DeSantis, has to be one of the great cutting jobs I've ever seen in politics. But he didn't even know what hit him. They were eating, pudding with his fingers. And the story is, she was the big operative. She made him. He was this guy with no personality. She got him elected to Congress. He was not supposed to win for governor. She got him elected governor. And then Mrs. DeSantis turned on her and drove her right to Mar-a-Lago. And Ron DeSantis ain't been the same since he's with Miss Wiles. I promise you. When this all emerges, and I don't even think I know her. I know her daddy was like Pat Summerall, was a big time sports announcer.
Right.
I got to tell you from a distance, man, that one wields a really effective knife. Woo.
No, I think it's important, and I do think they're kind of underestimated. So Trump goes to the South Bronx for that, 4,000 person rally the other night after the trial,
and then
everyone's
the two
ridiculing
felons
him.
up there.
What's that?
The two felons,
the felons. So that was a little lunatic, but I don't. Everyone's ridiculing him on Democratic, Biden campaign. He's going to a place he can't win New York, and what's he wasting his time for? I feel like that was pretty effective. He showed that he's willing to go anywhere. He went to an 85% blue area. Biden never goes to an 85% red area, right? I mean, he can sort of say to Hispanics and other parts of the country, "Hey, I'm willing to campaign anywhere, and I care about you guys." Maybe.
I think they don't have much money, and it was cheap. It was convenient.
Right.
He got a ton of press.
Right.
I think we could make something about the two convicted felons that he had there, or whatever. But it was right, and then and he says, "Oh, I'm going to carry New York. I'm going to carry California." But most politicians actually deep down think they can do anything. Right. I remember at the end of the 92 campaign, Bill Clinton snuck off and went to Mississippi. If shit is going on there, well, William Wynn and Mike Espy said if I came here, they thought I could win. So, Jesus, I saw Mike Espy a year ago. What the hell did you do that for? But they don't. They think that they actually, Bill Clinton thinks, if I can just get in front of the bank president, I can convince him. Sorry, you're not going to convince that guy. He's been a Republican since before he was born, okay? But and I think Trump has that, I'd hate to equate anybody with Trump, but I think he's got that kind of salesman optimism about him. If you just get me in front of these people, the blacks, they love me.
And again, it only has to work with like 1 out of 20, right? It's not like he has to convince massive numbers.
Yes. We're dealing in a universe of fairly small tolerances here. It's not, we've just become so accustomed to taking a foreign trip and the approval goes up 5%. Or that a convention, the things we talked about that just don't happen anymore.
I guess the one thing that will happen, maybe we can close in a minute on this. I thank you for taking all this time. Is I guess he will make a VP pick. That's traditional. You have any view on both what Trump's going to do and should do? I mean, it's one of the few things that's going to happen this summer that's actually like different.
What are you going to do on what?
A vice presidential pick. For Trump.
I mean, my own view is probably Doug Burgum.
Yeah, that's kind of been my view too. We haven't even talked about that.
He doesn't do anything. I guess his Pence pick was a little spot. I think Pence might have helped him a little bit. I mean, he did give him a little patina of credibility with these evangelical voters. I mean, it's great. Look, I read the Washington Post story about him offering these energy companies $1 billion. If they raise $1 billion, they can write his plan. I mean, I don't know, man. That's not typical. I mean, that's not normal. That happens all the time. Actually, I never have seen a presidential candidate offer to let them write their own regulations, their own bill if they raise $1 billion for it. No, I don't think that happens all the time. You and I have seen a lot in Washington. I don't think we've ever seen that, no, anything remotely like that. I've certainly said, well, we'll certainly be very considerate and understand a lot of the issues you have are concerns that we share. And, if you, my trusted aide here, please call, Bill, if you got any kind of issues that come up or anything like that. But I've never heard of that. No one has said, well, yeah, James, that's, $1 billion for regulatory. No, that's pretty unusual.
Yeah, it wouldn't be a bad thing to make an issue of, and either in the campaign or in the debate, I suppose. Now, I've also thought the safest pick, Trump will just go for the safest pick who won't cause any trouble for him. And Pence was that in a way in 2016 with a little plus on the evangelical side. And Burgum is a rich business guy. And I also think this is, let's end on this, Monsieur. So your point about the males vote, which maybe is worth developing a little more. I think Trump does not think it hurts him to have 2 males on the ticket. I mean, I think everyone thinks he's going to pick a woman or a minority, but I don't know that I think he has a sort of view which is pretty cynical. We may not like it, but that, you know what, 2 older white rich guys, that's kind of attractive to Republicans. And it's not that unattractive to a certain type of swing voter who thinks, well, those guys know what they're doing. They're business guys, they're et cetera, tough guys.
He seems pretty intent that he's going to do it his way. I mean, he's telling you, we're not going to have any of this General Kelly, Rex Tillerson, Gary Cohn, not going through that anymore. I mean, he's really laying the groundwork to say, I ran on this. I told you I was going to do this. Now I'm going to do it. And I could see somebody saying, well, if you pick another white male, you're going to get a lot of flack. He said, that's exactly the kind of flack I want. And that may be just what he wants to do, and I'm not doing it like you tell me to do it. I'm doing it my own way. And by the way, he'll have a point if he wins. He told you that he wanted to, on day one, what he was going to do. He told you the kind of people that he was going to appoint. And he's going to take that as a complete justification to do whatever I want to do. I didn't hide it from the voters. I told them. And, to some extent, he is telling us. And it's always the thing that a voter hears. We say that in one breath, you're going to do all these horrible things. In the next breath, we say, don't vote for him because you can't believe a word he says. Mm-hmm. Well, that's where you get into a jam. Do you believe him or not believe him? And I think when it comes to his own personal power, you always have to believe him. And he'll say anything to acquire more of that. But I don't know. But it's a contradictory message. You can't believe a word he says, but you have to believe that he's going to end the Constitution as we know it.
Yeah, and it fits in with, I hear this from Republicans who are tempted to go back to Trump all the time. Well, the first term, the guardrails held. Why won't they hold in the second term? I mean, they barely held. And none of the people who helped hold them up are going to be there in the second term, Pence and, Mattis.
Right. Gary Cohn is not going to be there to move things around on your desk so you don't see it.
Right.
Or General Kelly is not going to be there to.
But bringing that home is hard to voters, I think. That they saw him for 4 years. They think it wasn't that terrible. What's the problem? You got to really, that's why it has to be a forward-looking campaign. Someone was quoted the other day in the paper, if it's a referendum on Trump's presidency against Biden's presidency, that's not good for Biden. Fairly or unfairly, but people retrospectively have sort of whitewashed their memories of the Trump presidency.
So there's one word that Biden needs to use more often. The recovery. But by saying the recovery is enough, you remind people that we were down. Okay? We can argue whether or not people were better off 4 years ago or whatever, but we can't argue we're certainly better off when I took office on January the 1st, 2021. But he used the word recovery because that connotes that you're recovering from something. So if you see somebody that is just had surgery, and you say, "How do you feel?" I don't feel good. They say, "How do you feel?" "I'm recovering." You say, "Well, good. I'm glad to hear that." Not to say that I'm fine, but I'm recovering because if I had, open heart surgery, I would want to be recovering too, or anything like that. So I think that's one word that they need to use, and that people will say, "Well, yeah, it was better than it was," and he's not. I don't think it's a frontline attack, but it's certainly a secondary attack if he answers, is the grotesque mismanagement of the pandemic. I mean, we just forget how bad that was. I mean, and I don't blame people. Who wants to remember? I hated the goddamn thing. But I think every little word is going to count in this. And I think recovery is one of those words that can help him.
James, thank you for this conversation. Thank you for all this good advice to the president and his team.
Thank y'all for all freaking work you're doing. Tim liked my last video. He told me to play it on the show.
That's good. That's good. But we'll get together after the debate or the non-debate on June 27th and do an analysis of how much how the whole thing's been turned around by your counsel to the president.
Good start to the day in the Pacific time zone.
Thank you, James. And thank you all for joining us on Conversations. If you enjoyed this video and would like to see more like it, please don't forget to like and subscribe. Your interest in this program means a lot to me. I appreciate it.